All right, boys and girls, welcome once again to the Bass, Kayak, and Beers podcast. This is the real life. It's your boy Armando. We're going to have a great episode for you today. Today, I got Steve Owens, the tournament director for the Bassmaster. Yeah, Bassmaster Kayak Series. I know it's changed names a couple of times, but Bassmaster Kayak Series. And we're going to be talking a little bit about, how the mid-season reviews for Steve. It's his first year at the helm, like a full season. I know he kind of took over at the beginning. Then there were some changes, but now he's back in a kind of like a full-time basis for the Bassmaster Kayak Series, and we've seen the effect. We credit a lot of Steve Owens for kind of saving the Bassmaster Kayak Series, which in my opinion, I know the opinion of a lot of people, it was at the very least, to put it kindly, on a downward trend, and like we were wondering if the Bassmaster Kayak Series would ever recuperate or stay long term. But Steve Owens has had a huge effect on the turnaround of the Bassmaster Kayak Series. There's been a lot of changes in rules at the beginning before the season started. There were some rule changes mid-season that I was not aware of, and it caught me by surprise on Possum Kingdom. But we're going to talk a little bit about that. I think those rules really do help out. Not everybody is a fan of the rules when the season started. If you heard the segment, the podcast that I did with, Dan Perry, who's the host of the Advanced Kayak Angler, we did a podcast together, an episode that we talked about, kind of like the changes, not just in Bassmasters, but in all three national trails, and how it has a negative effect, or at least a percentage of a negative effect for certain groups of people in the bass or kayak bass fishing community that prefer the more traditional paddle. I know that episode got a lot of attention. I was kind of surprised that a lot of people took Dan's side or Dan's opinion or Dan's side on this one. I didn't realize there were that many people that were not a fan of the rule changes. And again, this is not Steve Owen. This was across the board. All three national trails made changes to kind of align and, fix a couple of things that in my opinion, needed to be fixed and addressed. But not everybody's a fan of it. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about, what's next for the Bassmaster Kayak Series, the rest of the season and forward. So that's going to be our show, and I'm done with my intro. Let's bring Steve Owens to the show. And Steve, thank you so much for taking the time, man. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy man.
Good to be back on here again, man. Yeah, we're just sitting down here in Tennessee, sweating in the humidity, and now we've got the sadly, I feel bad for them, but we're being put out by the smoke from the Canadian wildfires. We've got a lot of bit of it. Yeah, we're getting. I'm South Tennessee, like pretty close to the Georgia line.
Wow.
We got quite a bit of haze in the air from it. You can smell it and taste it. It sucks, man. I feel sorry for those people going through all that. I didn't know 7 million acres almost are burned up there.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of woodland up in Canada. So,
I don't even know how much acre is in the whole world. I didn't think it was 7 million. 7 million. I can't even fathom that. Golly, that's crazy. So.
Wow, I didn't know it was. I know it was kind of like the border. I saw somebody, can't remember who it was, somebody in Wisconsin, kayak bass fisherman, posting on social media. They were kind of struggling with that too. But I didn't know it had reached all the way down to Tennessee. That's crazy.
Yeah, the smoke is. Yeah, we're getting it now, and so
wow.
So hopefully they get a lot of rain up there or something, because me and my wife went to Montana a few years ago, and they had been hit with some national park wildfires, a long time ago.
Yeah.
In those instances, a lot of it, it's better to let it just burn itself out, so to speak. But, it was 20-something years ago, and you could still see charred standing timber. But it is crazy, miraculous, the miracle of how our God-formed earth can repair itself, because
heal itself.
If they hadn't told us, we would have never known, So it sucks.
Well, thoughts and prayers to everybody up there in Canada. Kind of like speaking of that. Well, speaking of thoughts and prayers, Ryan Lunch Money Lambert, I guess I was just looking at his social media. I guess he got old man problems, like tear Achilles tendons. Ryan, if you're listening or watching, I hope you get better soon. Oh, by the way, big congratulations also to Jackson Orr. It's crazy to think about. Jackson Orr has such a young kid, but it feels like a veteran in this sport. And he has never won a Hobie BOS. This is his first win at Cayuga Lake. So big congrats to Jackson Orr. Really happy for him. That's a hell of a Angler of the Year race with Ewan Miner and Jackson, or both neck and neck. And I know they're good friends. Future's bright for this sport with those two kids going on. But let's talk a little bit about the Bassmaster Kayak Series. Steve, first season, kind of like well, at the helm, like taking over. I know you were there at the beginning, but now you're like full time taking care of the Bassmaster Kayak Series and shepherded into the new era. How's it gone so far?
Man, it's been good. Thankfully, you all have got behind what we're trying to do and supported us, and the numbers are there. We've had a great turnout so far this year. Especially, we had just recently talked about Possum Kingdom with 129. The weekend after a holiday, a vacation holiday week for people, but it was the only date we could get. Much like lacrosse coming up is right after the Independence Day weekend travel, so it's just where we could get fit in, with coming out with a schedule so late after I took the job. We're just super happy and blessed that everybody's continuing to show up and reach out, and new people asking questions, and how to get into it next year, and like everybody else, what are we doing next year, which we're working on right now. AJ and I had a 2-hour discussion today on working on deconflicting everything again and doing better, because this year their schedule was already there. And so I just had to piece in what I could, and it's overlapped some. And then I feel like it's got both of our numbers just a little bit, because one week you're fishing a Hobie.
Yeah.
That same weekend is the deadline to sign up for a Bassmaster. And then a week or two later, you're fishing the Bassmaster. And then there's another Hobie deadline due. So it's just like bam, 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 bam. You get punch drunk with entry fees and tournaments. So we're going to work on getting that spaced out as much as we can next year. So that'll be good.
Not to spice it up, but it kind of brings a good point. What about KBF? No, is KBF become now, and not throwing shit at anybody, but the reality is it's gone down. The numbers are gone down. Now, is there any like consideration between you and AJ that's like, okay, we need to keep KBF in the fold, or is it more like it's the writings on the wall, we just move on and just simplify things between scheduling between you and Hobie BOS?
No, we will. It wasn't me mentioning it wasn't an exclusion. It's just
Yeah.
we just hadn't had that conversation yet. Is all. Because again, like you touched on, we'll look at rules again and see where we need to tweak, because nothing gets set in stone for 30 years, other than
Yeah.
government seats. But we'll look at them every year and update and cut and gut, or add to wherever we think it needs to happen to first of all, keep our integrity, in check in the sport, which you have to do. And not everybody's going to always agree on how you do those things, but it's why you have to trust the people that, you put in those positions to do it, especially when you keep in mind the fact that we do listen to everybody.
Yes.
And then take the greater good into considerations, because there's rules that are in there that I don't like, that I don't like, because I don't. We've had this conversation before. I don't like my alarm clock telling me what to do. I don't like rules. I don't like everything. So having said that, I feel like I'm a pretty good person to come up with rules, because I want it to be as fair and equitable, and not exclude, as much as possible. So,
And by the way,
yeah,
for those that are watching live, if you have a question or comment, as long as it's respectful, please put it up on the chat. We'll try to do our best for Steve Owens to answer any questions you may have about the Bassmaster Kayak Series. And also, if you are listening on our MP3 formats when we upload them on Mondays, or anytime after that, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we appreciate it if you give us your reviews. Yeah, leave us comments. Let us know how we're doing. Follow us under Bass Kayak and Beers on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And also, if you have any comments about the show, you want to email me, basskayak and beers at gmail.com. So that being said, let's move forward with this. Steve, let's jump right in because I feel like, your job in a certain way is unfair. Like the beginning of the season or last year, I made my thoughts known about what I thought was wrong with the Bassmaster Kayak series, and you weren't there at that time, so it's not a reflection on you per se, but just overall, the way was trending downwards, in my opinion. I know the guys at KBN and other podcasts felt the same way. Then we do the call outs. We kind of demanded, the things to get better. We demand the rule changes. Then the rule changes come. And one of the things when, do a podcast, and I mentioned it on my last episode with Jeff Malad, is like I have to make sure that I include everyone's opinion, even if they're not my opinion. Because as a podcaster, you have to be responsible. There are certain groups that I may not agree with their ideas on how to do things, but or or their thoughts on certain rules, but I have to make sure I amplify their opinions as well. And I feel like, man, it's for you, it's like damn if you do, damn if you don't. How do you, going through this process of like the rules were completely changed, like it was a major overhaul on rules. How frustrating is it for you to, do those rules, make these changes, try to make everyone happy as much as you can, and then kind of deal with the criticism of now the rules?
It really, to be honest with you, it's not frustrating because, you know, all we can do is what we do. And when I put the shovel down, I'm happy with the day's work that I did. So, AJ and myself, Hoover, Steve Fields, Bassmaster, GL Compton, Chris Bowes, you know, one thing kayakers are adjusting to and doing a pretty good job is that when we're wanting this Bassmaster series, Bassmaster rules are a lot different than kayak rules. So we're trying to find out, and that's something I explain to people is what we're doing this year is not what we're going to do next year, and that's not what we're going to do the year after that. We're figuring all of this out. I mean, we're still a new sport.
Yeah.
We're not professional in a lot of avenues, even though we have several really good elite series going on. We're still working on how to get it because there's so many of us, myself included, that when we go fish tournaments, we forget that we're out there in a tournament. We're fishing against our buddies for money. I don't think it really, really sinks in sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm in a Bassmaster event, I'm at Hobie, KBF, or All American, or Queen City, the Michigan Kayak Trail. I mean, these numbers are getting huge everywhere you go. And when that happens, and I bring up, there's a larger national club years and years ago that have kicked out or produced a dozen check cashers across this country. And I talked to them several years ago, and as it got bigger, it got more business like, which is
Yeah.
going to happen. And that's totally okay. There's nothing wrong with the business side of a kayak tournament. So what I explain to people is that, as it grows, things are going to tighten up. It's going to be a little more serious. Sometimes a little bit of the fun goes out of a little bit of your event, not the
Yeah.
entire event, not the entire pre-fishing period, the being excited about it of it up until your pre-fishing period comes in. All just because you have a little bit of a bad experience in a tournament doesn't mean the whole tournament was a waste. And
Correct.
so as we get a little more serious in some of these things, a little bit of it isn't always going to taste right to everybody. So they're not going to come back. And that's not good because I don't want anybody to leave. I want everything to go through the roof, but when that happens, that's okay. It's not personal. It's just, this sport has evolved to a point where I would rather do something else, but I want to be inclusive. That's why we do listen to everybody that we can. So when we come out with the rules and people don't like this, that, and the other, I say it doesn't bother me. It does too a little bit because I take this very serious, and I
Yep.
do. I've got thin skin sometimes, but when that happens to me, that's typically my little spider sense saying make a note of that and see first of all what did maybe I not do correctly, what could I have done better, is it a legitimate point then I'll reach out to that person and discuss it and get their perspective. That takes a lot of work, and that, I don't mind doing it. So I'm okay with that part of it because in the end, we're all making the soup. We're all going to put a little bit of an ingredient in it. Some people put more than others, and then some you have to keep from putting something in because they'll ruin it. And but yeah, the rules so far, as you mentioned, we tweaked some of them, and it was because we had that mindset of the people want pro series, and the things that take some of the fun out are what makes it a pro series. So
Yeah.
I don't think we need that. Just because A, B, or C does it on a professional level doesn't mean that that's what we need in our community because we own this. We're building it. We're building it under the banner of other things. But if we all don't get to build it together, then they're not going to want us to be a part of it because we're not doing our jobs and doing the work. They'll provide the platform, they'll provide the name, they have an integrity that goes behind that, and we're expected to keep it too. And that's what we'll continue to do. And again, like I'll keep going on about is, we'll constantly reinvent whatever we need to do to get the masses. You may land on 60-40. Some days it's 90-10. And it's just kind of like a marriage. There's sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's 90-10, and it doesn't last a week. Sometimes it can last years, but I'm not going to quit. We're not going to give up, and we'll just keep working on it all.
One of the things that I wanted to touch on is, when we talk about the rules, I think we're now seeing payouts that are $10,000 payouts for first place. That
Mm-hmm.
changes the game, right? And I think if you don't tighten things up, and uh, if you don't take care of some things, there are going to be people with not the best intentions. They're going to be people that are not interested in the camaraderie or the growth of the sport. They're going to be interested in how they can catch a check. And I understand you can't always, stop people from trying to cheat, but you do have to find that balance where you're going to try to make it as hard as possible to cheat, but at the same time, making sure the fun doesn't get sucked away from it. Where you draw the line, I think it's something that the line may be here today, but next season, that fine line where's the balance may have shifted one way or the other. A lot of has to do with technology, a lot has to do with what the majority want, as far as like if the majority of the people are not, we have to take in consideration the Bassmaster Kayak, Bassmasters, or BBS are companies. They're not charity uh
Mm-hmm.
events. They're not here to, you know, to provide charity. They're here to, provide a service and make sure they're sustainable as well. And with that, we have to understand that if somebody is going to invest the money so we can do this and get sponsorships and grow and make this more profitable for the anglers, there's a give and take. We can't expect somebody just to give us all this without us having to, sacrifice some things. um a lot of the rule changes, I think I divided into two things really. It's the maybe three: the communication, the port, the accessible waters, and the launch destinations. How how did you, Steve Owens, and maybe Chad got together, or the people that got together and decided this was the route? Like, what was the process going into making these decisions?
Um, Obviously a lot, and it wasn't just the year before 2022. This is years and years of things that as we grow, people push boundaries, and that's what you should do. You always should push boundaries. You just should. And it's okay to push boundaries, but I'm going to say this and be done with it because this is one of the most matter of fact things that people have to understand. And I'll talk to you, Armando. Armando, we've had several conversations, and just a minute ago, without getting into the great detail, you mentioned something in the Possum Kingdom tournament, and then after the fact, you messaged two other guys to ask questions about it instead of contacting the tournament director. That's what you have to do if you're going to push the envelope on things.
Mm.
Ask the tournament director, is this legal? What about this? And here's another thing, you can't be vague because you want the tournament director to answer your question to where you can do what you want. Because then, if something were to happen and you have to back up and say, hey, you just broke a rule, then there's no leniency. There is no penalty. It's an absolute punishment. And what I mentioned, about you in that particular situation, I only used that because we do communicate a lot.
Yeah.
And even then, with someone that like we interact with one another a lot, we still don't necessarily contact the tournament director, because and we do all talk to our buddies. That's our buddies are our sounding
Yeah.
board, but legitimate concerns about your tournament day or a rule, man, that has to come straight to the director, because I see it all the time, and I know you do. You talked about it not long ago when we were talking. People will get on a message board or a thread and ask a question about a rule or something, and an angler will start answering. Well, they're
Yep.
trying to help. They are trying to help, and I really appreciate that. But their answers aren't always right. So now you got people. Now you've got two people doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest takeaway from that. And I do appreciate all of you. You are very mindful of our time. We're all 24/7. We message each other all the time. We don't
Yep.
pay attention to the clock. But everybody, it doesn't bother me to get a message at 3 a.m. because my phone's on silent, number one, and I'll get to it when I wake up the next morning. So we got to keep that communication going. I talked to a rep of my dugout duty a while ago. I was on the phone for a good little while on the West Coast with one of our um, it's a tackle company, and we were talking about some things. And we've had a few uh-ohs in our chain of command, or some things we were doing with one another, but it was because I had sent a text and he didn't necessarily understand it, or he sent an email that went to my spam instead of just, if you don't hear from us in a couple of days, call one another. So that's the biggest thing on the rules. So pushing those envelopes, you mentioned specifically launches and things, and I do wish Dan was on here, because Dan and I both are very opinionated. Dan and I are good friends. We fish on Gunnersville. He fishes my $40 tournaments. He fishes it all, and we've been good buddies. When he and Jimmy had their podcast, and before then too. And so I wanted to answer some of the things he said so that he could give a rebuttal or whatever. But no, no, all of the we're destroying the paddlers, we're trying to do this or that. No, it's absolutely not true. It's a narrative that happens in the chatter and between one another, because that's what they feel has happened, because they do feel targeted, and they should to an extent, because some of the things that they do might seem to be getting increasingly harder to do, but they're actually not. Dan had mentioned, you're setting up this and this where they can't launch here, they can't launch there. I challenge you to go to any tournament on my schedule for Bassmaster, Tennessee Bass Nation, Georgia Bass Nation, or Tennessee Valley Kayak Anglers. There's 33 tournaments. Look at them and show me where I did not include almost every bit of skinny water that you could with
Yeah.
launches provided. It's just not true. When that happened, the culture shock of it was real. And that was true. People were nervous that it was getting cut out. But that happened when the announcement was made. But since that announcement, I don't feel like anyone has done the homework and looked
Yeah.
in and said, well, there actually are plenty of skinny water launches, because there are. And Daniel, you guys were having no, these are arguments, because I take it personal and serious, because I won't exclude anyone. Now, when it comes to dragging over or accessing water that might be landlocked, things like that, that does need to be cut out. And you asked what brought those changes. It's a lot of years of things like that happening.
Yeah.
I won't ever go public with them. It's in the past. It's history. It's over and done. But we won't let it happen again as long as we can. And it's a lot of what happened wasn't necessarily malicious. It's just there's gray area. And so when you're in the gray area, you're totally okay. I got no problem with it, but gray area is not good for the greater good.
Yeah.
So, having been charged as stewards of these tournament series, we have to do that, because If someone walks home with cash money in their pocket from an event, and then it's clouded by they did A, B, and C, that looks bad on you as a tournament director. It looks bad on that angler. And when it continuously can happen in some instances, then you have to do something about it. And as long as you're not directly taking away from something that is okay to do ethically, then it's okay to do. And that's what we did here. As I mentioned, you can get to almost every bit of water that you want to fish. If we go to Weiss Lake, Logan Wilson, and all that down there, trust me, you're going to have water to fish. You might not be able to drop off of a side of a ditch runoff on a bridge, but you're going to be able to access your water because I understand we fish lake tournaments, river tournaments, and there's a separation there that's just it's okay, but it's small potatoes. It's not. If we're fishing, Gunnersville, I want you to be able to get back up into Battle Creek a good ways to fish because that's your specialty. There's not a certain skill. I'm sorry. I don't believe getting out and dragging over a pile of rocks or a bunch of logs that's got water trickling over it. That's not a skill set. Anyone can do that. The skill set is what these, because I just
No.
fished a river tournament in Georgia. Dude, those river people are nuts. That is hard work. They deserve every bit that they can. And I will always make sure that I can include every bit of water. Ask the Georgia guys. Our Three Rivers tournament we had on the Flint, Okmulgee, and the Oconee, it was up to every dam you could get to, the tributary arms off of it. One thing you got to be careful of, though, Dan kept mentioning boundaries, and boundaries sounds like a fix all. And he was pretty die on the hill for that boundaries, but that's not accurate.
Yeah, I agree.
Boundaries can work on some lakes, not all lakes. If you try to set a boundary, then you are telling yourself as a tournament director, when Armando comes off the main lake of Lake X and goes up arm number 1, he can make it all the way to this area, and that's where the last boundary is. Well, you can go a mile or two up. Let's say it's 8 miles. You can go 2 miles into that creek, and the next thing you know, it's impassable. And you can say, "Hey, we should be able to drag through laydowns and this, that, and the other." Now, you just opened an angler up to entanglement, so it's dangerous in the nature of itself. So, but at the same time, there's safe ways to do it too. So when you make those kind of decisions, you have to understand I can't go to each laydown to make sure you can navigate it safely. Jim Ware nearly died doing it. Dusty McGuire, I mean, his was a different situation. He got caught in a laydown. He wasn't climbing through. So poor example. But so when you make these decisions, I can't tell every creek arm that you can make it to the boundary marker by staying in your kayak. So that's what those rules are, and they suck because again, I don't like telling people they can't do something, but that's where you got to land. You do. You can't let anything goes. Everything goes. You just can't. And if you want that, then that's fine too. That's why we have some of our grassroots and our Bass Nation stuff, because that kind of stuff is a little more lax, so to speak, on water entry. But like you mentioned, when you're getting up into those, the big banks coming through, then, you got to be a little different on it. But again, all due respect to anyone out there, I talk to the Alabama guys and we don't agree. I say that because there are a lot of river rats down there.
Yeah.
But dude, I do, I'll just say it bluntly. Lance Coley helped me a lot on the Gunnersville ramps because I tried to include as many public accesses as I could because of the advantage of a pedal drive and a motor, because it just is, that's all they are advantages. They're physical advantages to people. You can argue they don't help you catch fish, but they help you from your tongue hanging out in September when you went 5 miles.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot easier to stomp on a Torpedo or a Newport or a Motor Guide than to paddle. And so I want those guys to be able to access their spots. But I did share with them, when you asked me to put those launches on the map, that's there from now on. So you're giving up your juice, and they understood it. And so, I don't mean to go on down that road a whole lot on that.
No, but
there's some narrative there that's just not true, because in some of the things that are said and were said, you're putting an intent behind
Yeah.
myself and AJ in these decisions, like, and it was pretty matter of factly stated, and didn't appreciate it. But again, he's my friend. We've messaged and talked a little bit about it, and those guys that have a problem with it, a lot of them are my friends too. But we've just not had the chance to have these conversations. And thankfully for podcasts like these, they can go back and watch them and listen and shoot me a message, because I'm not always right, and I will back up, and like on the communication thing you touched on, we didn't do a good job on that one. And so, you had mentioned, well, I'll let you get into that. So I don't want to just lead everything, but, so,
No, but yeah, and I know there's some questions and comments by some of our listeners or people that are watching. A couple of them say Facebook user. I think when you log in or click the link, you have to click on letting Facebook permission to comment or to identify yourself. I don't know. It comes up as Facebook users, and I want to give credit for those that are asking questions and commenting. I
yeah,
appreciate it. If it says Facebook user, I think you have to click something where it says you're authorizing Facebook to display your name or something like that. But I appreciate it. I know Jeremy McCormick has a question. We'll get to that. Dale Scott
yeah,
also has some great insight into that. I wanted to touch a little bit on a couple of things. First of all, and I'm trying to do my best, to kind of like bring Dan's point. Dan is not here. I know
yeah.
he's a little bit busy. I think you know
That's why I wore this, Dan.
he's I think something like his wife has a promotion, has a new job, so he has to
Oh, that's awesome.
do a little bit more babysitting and stuff like that. So I didn't want to. I know he's struggling to keep an episode together because he's so busy. So we couldn't have him today. But I want to amplify or try to share Dan's point of view, whether I agree or not, just because in the fairness
Yeah,
of you know stating what was said and then getting your point of view, whether I believe that or not. But one of the things that we talked about was, that the perception was that these rules are being changed because big companies, like, just to name, not I'm not saying like companies that have like Old Town, where they have their spotlight technology, Newport vessels, torpedoes, a live scope, and all that. They don't want a angler with a kind of like a simple kayak, you know, basically saying they don't want somebody like Drew Gregory kind of show them up, like we in which I have the ton of respect for Drew Gregory, but he has like a very simple kayak, paddle, nothing fancy with live scope. Up until now or last season, he didn't have really a motor and all that. So we saw how dominant he can be when he can fish his style, because he is absolutely one of the best anglers out there, kayak bass fishing. So there was this narrative that this is more of like big companies pushing the little guy out so they can, to convince people, like saying, no, you need live scope, or no, you need a motor. And that's why it's kind of like Bassmaster, Hobie BOS are getting in bed with these companies to kind of promote their product. I know there's sponsorship involved, but to clarify, and I know the answer, but I know for those that are watching and listening, is it true? Is it companies saying, hey, I don't want, somebody with a small kayak with no live scope winning tournaments, and we need you to put rules? Is that, we know, I know, and but I'll let you comment on that.
damn. No, absolutely not. And I'll tell you, the only input Motor Guide has put in this year was, hey, where's our prop? Because they gave me a prop that once I put it together, I can't take it back down. So I can't take it on the road with me. And no, like anyone that we ever mention, whether it be Zoom meetings or anything like that, when they mention seeing Drew in what he fishes out of, and they're like, whoa, Russ, when Russ was kicking all our tails all over Tennessee in a paddle kayak before we allowed motors, he was like, everyone is amazed by it. So no, there's absolutely yes. And here's another thing. I think it's easy and fun to vilify a big corporation or Big Brother. Well, not Big Brother, they suck, but big
Yeah.
corporations and like a big guy picking on a little guy. I truly, with all due respect, that's over sensationalized and fantasized and made into a us against them that does not exist. Absolutely does not exist. No, and no. So, and I'm not a puppet. I'm just not. So the way I've mentioned before, wait, everyone talks about how successful the stuff Lambert and I've done in the past were. And I've garnered a lot of sponsors for our kayak clubs. And every one of those, they're like, well, how do you make that happen? Well, it's because you can't be afraid to lose something. I don't care what sponsor it is we have. If they try to pit another sponsor against another sponsor, then we don't work with them next year. Just cut and dry. No eat, no goodbye or no long drawn out thing. It's just like, hey, we've moved on because you know that is our tournament series that he and I run. So that's ours. We run it for our people, not for whomever. And that's the same way the Bassmaster stuff. The only thing that I will share, and it's about the only thing there is to speak of, is promotion. That's it. You get dinged sometimes when you mention. Let's just for specifics. If I mention, hey, Bassmaster this year, that angler of the year is going to take home $5,000. Well, it's my job to make sure that I say that Dakota Lithium
Of
angler of the
course. Yeah.
year. And I missed it a once or so at the very beginning, but I've got a relationship with them, and they just kind of elbowed me in the ribs and said, "Hey, man, don't forget." And I haven't since. That's about it. That's all that you get from sponsor stuff because I would say even in the bass boat world where it's millions and millions of dollars, those sponsors want their product out there, but all of that is off of commercials and everything like that. The use of the product on the boat, a lot of that stuff never gets seen. People don't pay attention to what kind of motors on the back of that boat, but they're all Mercury's or Yamahas. And so that's why they want their logo placement to be so prominent. And that's that. But no, there is no dictating. We don't want this person in a whatever kind of kayak, and that's been said several times. And you and I discussed, and no, there's this whole corporate pressure thing is just it's not applicable. It's not in our sport, and you and I both we're all in it from the bottom all the way to the top, and I haven't seen any of it. You have normal politics stuff because men are petty, and
Yeah.
but other than that, dude, that's no. Nope, there's no espionage, there's no blackballing, and it's just yeah. So that just yeah, we laughed about it, chuckled about it, but no, that's just it's kind of ridiculous. It's just not there. That's a lot of chatter just from people just talking, and that's fine. I do it too. I'm hyper paranoid. That's why I never feel like I do a good job on a lot of things because I'm hyper paranoid that I miss something or that somebody's not going to like it. But that's my motivation to try to stay on top of things, though. So.
By the way, we have Dwayne Wally. I have to have Dwayne Wally on this podcast at some point. And I have a huge amount of respect for Dwayne Wally. Founder of Tourney X, and Revolution. Oh my God, I can't speak now. Revolution. Look, I forgot how to spell the word revolutionize. Revolutionize the sport of kayak or the tournament by the technology of Tourney X. Sorry about that, Dwayne. While I was fishing all day, I'm kind of tired, but huge prop to Dwayne Wally. I have to bring him
You
on the
get
show.
no
I
pity
know,
from here.
I know Dwayne Wally was this. Last year I was very vocal about some of the stuff in Bassmaster characters, and I know Dwayne Wally was doing its best to keep that afloat, even though he wasn't the tournament director. But I mean, the job that he's done with Tourney X, and kind of, I felt for him last year. When John Stewart was running the show, I have no ill, sentiment to John Stewart. I just didn't agree with the decisions, but I watched man, Dwayne Wall is trying to do his best to kind of you know, put the best foot forward and just make this work. So huge shout out to Dwayne for what he's
Yeah,
done. And
literally, if it wasn't for Dwayne, we wouldn't have a Bassmaster
yeah,
series, and that was like he and I discussed when I left, dude. It sucked because I knew he and Tyler and Juan we had just brought in and Patrick Malone and Ben Smith helped us from West Virginia, Mountain State Kayak Anglers, get the foundation set, but Dwayne, people forget because he does such an outstanding job with
Yeah.
Tourney X customer service. That is him. And he's got a normal, regular wrench turning day job, and he does Tourney X, and he's trying to keep Bassmaster rolling. And John, John's determination and stuff was there. It just wasn't applicable in some situations. But yeah, if Dwayne hadn't have came out and stuck his neck out and done it, we wouldn't be here where we're at. So I'm very grateful for that. He's been family and been a blessing to me personally. We've gotten to talk far more about our lives. Is he just got a new daughter-in-law? They got married down here on Lake Gunnersville, and so I mean, that's just it's honestly the best part of our sport is getting to know all of y'all. So
Yeah, no, and I know Dwayne took a lot of heat last year with that season. Maybe and again, he was just trying to do the best to keep this afloat. So shout out again to Dwayne.
and he's
Um,
from Mississippi. He can only do so much.
kind of like Dan Perry. No, just kidding. Just kidding with you guys. But speaking of Tourney X, I wanted to touch on this, and I know Dwayne is not his fault when Tourney X, whether it crashes or it's not working like it should. We had that in Possum Kingdom. That's not his fault. Like that technology is, we're slave to our own devices, limited to our own devices. But you and I talked about this after that episode aired. But I wanted to, and you explained to me your side, but I wanted the audience to kind of hear your side of things. And we didn't talk about this in the pre-show, but one of the issues that I do have with not just Bassmaster Kayak Series, Hobie BOS too, is like that 30-minute cutoff. It really does, and I'll be honest with you, it really does um lessen the enjoyment of the tournament. And I'm being honest with you. And again, this is no shot at you or Dwayne Wallet. This is just my honest opinion, how I feel. Like if I'm on a tournament like Possum Kingdom, and it happened in Kato too, where I'm like, okay, I got my string. I need to upgrade. I need to make changes. I need to make moves. But I don't have, I'm struggling to find signal, and now I have to only 30 minutes. And the boat ramp, one thing that I love is that camaraderie. Everybody helps out each other. Hobie BOS day 2 at Cado. Well, Hobie BOS day 1, somebody helped me get the pictures uploaded. Day 2, I was trying to help Guillermo Gonzalez upload his. He finally got some Wi-Fi. I know guys like Kalen Johnson who missed out on a check because he couldn't get Wi-Fi signal to upload his picture. And that's got to be the most frustrating thing. Like whether you win or not, just be able to say like, I did my fish. I wanted to be, not set in stone, obviously, but I wanted to reflect what I did. I wanted to be reflected on, in this case, the Tourney X app. Why is there, that may change in the future. Is there a way where, like, especially if it's a 2-day tournament, why the 30 minutes if it's day 1 of day 2? And can something be done for day 2 to kind of like maybe get lines in a little bit earlier? What can be done? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one that's kind of like been frustrated about this. Um,
Yeah, so the reason you can't do a different time on day 1 is because if you change it on day 2, no one's going to read or pay attention to them. Like what you mentioned about the communication thing, not understanding it. Well, I literally explained it in the captain's meeting, so there shouldn't be confusion on that. But so to your point, so I agree. So the reason it was 30 minutes in some is I'm going to share just a quick little backstory. So, like in Georgia Bass Nation or Tennessee Bass Nation here, if I put lines in at 20 minutes before daylight so that we can get in the water stealthily and get on out of to our spots before the bass boats get there, you got people that say we're launching in. Now, granted, sometimes I have missed the mark and we've launched real dark for a long time, but then they're like, well, we're launching too early, yada yada this. So then I change it, and dude, hell, there's 20 minutes of daylight before we launch here. So unless I do launch at 5:55, then we're never going to be able to nail it, and I don't care to do that. So So that's where the time thing comes. So if I do what you suggested and launch earlier, well, then there's too much dark and people don't like it. If you launch a little later so that people can see and do whatever, then those other people don't like it. So then, something, and this is a little bit of conditioning that I was guilty of as well. All right, so Georgia and Tennessee, I don't want you to have to stop fishing. Say lines out is 3 p.m. I don't want you to have to stop fishing at 1:30 so you can take 30 minutes to get back to the ramp, 30 minutes to load up, and then haul butt somewhere to get cell signal. So in Georgia, I allow an hour and then an hour and a half to get to check in because we have a lot of prizes and awards. Well, then I get guys showing up at check in 45 minutes early and they sit around and gripe for 45 minutes because I gave people an hour and a half to come. Well, the people upriver, they appreciate that hour and a half. So now they're not getting a speeding ticket trying to make check in. And so fast forward and go back to the Bassmaster and the Hobie series. So, which I did adjust. Possum Kingdom was the first one that was half hour. I was experimenting with it because, here's the problem. And it's very hard on Sunday while I'm getting prepared for awards for that judge to sit there for another 1 hour judging fish. So that judge is sitting there. We're out at 3 p.m. We got to have fish submitted at 4 p.m. So at 3:55, when you upload your 5 fish and you have a cracked mouth, we deduct that fish and then send you your penalty. What's the next step? We contact you and you get to submit a better picture, correct? Well, now that's going to take 20 minutes to get you to pull over on your way to awards and submit a better picture. So now we're going on into 5, 6 o'clock now because I'm not going to disallow you if you upload your fish during the dark period to not get a rebuttal. If your hand is covering the eye, we're going to make sure we call you to get a better picture in so that you get your fish scored like what you said. So now you got people who don't want to come to awards on Sunday, which is very important to us
Yeah.
so that we can hand out the checks and trophies. So you cut it down to 30 minutes so that we can have the production that we need at the end of the day. And so we can get all the fish judged and scored because like I said, we've got fish submissions that we need to give you the opportunity to give us another fish. The only way I see of doing that is if you upload your fish during the dark period, then if it gets deducted, you don't get to submit another fish. You know, I don't like that, and I don't want to do that, and I don't. That's just something that's an idea. I would never do that, but like Ron Champions mentioned multiple times, like on Kentucky Lake, he's had to cut his fishing day short an hour and a half or an hour several days just so he could go get his fish uploaded. What we're seeing more and more and more from anglers, and some of it's inexperienced anglers, they're not able to upload their fish. And then they wait until like 3:40 to call you and say, "Hey man, I don't have good cell signal. I can't get my fish uploaded." Well, I mean, you literally had all day long to call me and say, "Hey, I can't get my fish uploaded. I don't have cell signal." Then I will mention to you, if you can, text them to me. I'll upload them manually. Email them to me. I'll upload them manually. Sometimes that works better than the no cell signal kind of thing. But that's all. That's also education, and that takes sadly people getting burned. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't like the having to rush off of the water and get my fish uploaded. But now, having said that, if you're on the water and you can't get them uploaded, then you need to make certain that you're in communication with us to get that done. And you can't get pissed off if I say you can't get me your fish. You have to get off of the water and get them to me because there's no other answer to that. But yeah, the half hour, I think an hour is fine, but I really, really, really wish people would get their fish uploaded like they need to during the day because if we run into live uploading is at 4, you got to be at awards at 5, This is Sunday. We don't have until 8 p.m. every night to get you there and have a good awards. That's something, because I want to keep, things voluntary. But if it gets to the point, where you can't get anglers to show up to get their checks, and because that's your job, you fished your tournament, you got your money. Bass boats, 100% of them have to go to the weigh-in to get their weight correct. We don't. So we're pretty fortunate there. So the least a person can do is come to the awards and get up there, hold your check, even if you're not wanting to get in the checks, get pictures for us to publicize, because that's all these riders are asking for is pictures over and over and over. They want our content. So it may suck not getting to haul butt on back to the house, but man, that's why you're there. So if you can't get people to come to awards and everything, do you make that mandatory? Well, now you've ticked off however many people too, but yeah. So, but I did, I've rambled on a little bit, but yeah,
No,
but
but
like,
that's good points. Yeah.
yeah, it is like lacrosse. We're launching at 5. That should be dusky daylight, I think. 6:30. Um, and again, when you're dealing with these times, man, all you can trust is an app that gives you sunrise, sunset. And you don't always hit it, but lines out is 2:30 and upload is 3:30.
Yeah,
And,
so
and
that's an
and
hour. Yeah, that to me
that
is
is an
it's
hour.
an hour is what I would ask. Like, and to I'm sorry, Johnny Maddox's point and uh Dwayne Wally's point. Yes, I understand. You can't make everybody happy, and but we do have to bring this. If it's something that's frustrating, and again, I'm not gonna stop fishing. I'm not gonna go out and post on whatever KBN group page or something and insult Dwayne or insult AJ or insult Steve because I'm not happy. That I think that is crossing the line. But there has to be a space where we can talk about it. And
Sure.
even though we can't make everybody happy, at least listen to everybody's point of view. And I know, like when I'm on the boat ramp, I that day on day one, we were in the camaraderie. One of the things that I love was the camaraderie. There were like 4 or 5 of us trying to help 2 or 3 others to upload their pictures, giving them signals, or giving them our hotspots and stuff like that. So it's something that I think if we had an hour, I think that's a happy medium. I understand when we're talking about the angler's responsibility. Um, I understand the bass boats, cut their day short. They do have a motor. They can go, what,
Yeah.
50, 70 mile per hours. And especially on the Hobie BOS where you don't have a motor, weather could definitely play a part. Is like, well, I'm giving myself this amount to get back on the boat ramp, load up, and leave. But here's the problem: all of a sudden, you deal with headwinds that we're not expecting. Because the weather changes, thunderstorm or stuff like that, and then now, there we get affected by weather more than bass boats. So I think there has to be some leniency there, and I think
Yeah.
that's would be to me the happy medium. Is like let's get an hour in because we are not we it's like I said, we can't go on a bass boat and hit up 50, 60 mile per hours and make it to a bone ramp. We do have to, in some cases like the Bassmaster, you have a motor. Hobie BOS, you have to paddle or pedal, and you might think you can make it in a certain amount of time. The boat ramp may be full, you may not be able to get load up and leave. So that's one thing. I think when you're fishing on a and I agree with you on this, like you have to set like a hard rules in the sense that you can't just, this is one of those rules where you can't just go like, okay, well, in this lake it's a county lake, everywhere there's signal, let's do 30 minutes, and then the next trail it's an hour, because now that creates that confusion. Somebody that fish like, oh, I
Yeah.
thought it was 30 minutes, oh, I thought it was an hour. So I get that it's like hard boundaries, but I think that's something that can improve, like maybe going from 30 minutes to an hour, even 45 minutes, as much time. But I understand, and that's why I wanted to
Yeah.
bring you on here to
Yeah.
kind of give your perspective on it, and people understand why was it's 30 minutes and why sometimes it's not, what the reasons why is. I think it's the most important thing. And I think even if you
Yeah.
can't make everybody happy, knowing the reasons why gives them a little bit of like, okay, now at least I understand it, even though I may not agree with it.
Yeah,
So
I agree, and I know it is great. It really is. And I said I wanted to see on PK what we could get, and I know multiple people didn't like it or whatever, but like literally you're the only person that appreciatively spoke up about it. And but yeah, but like Josh Evans, we Bassmaster does. There's we have access to two Starlink satellites, I believe, to help with streaming. So that's another thing, Bass, they on their own accord came to me and, started asking about some things to improve, getting us out there further. Like you saw, we were on the elite just a little bit, and again, I'll share this. A lot of people, if you could share it, there's an Excel sheet that has literally blocks of time, like at the Bassmaster Classic, television time. That's why we have 22 minutes on stage. And everybody's like, it seems rushed because it goes by so quickly, but that's almost half of an hour of an 8-hour show. I mean, that's a pretty good bit of time,
yeah,
but it just moves quickly. So I get it. I was the same way. But after, let's say we're done, let's say we're at 7 a.m., we're on stage. We've gotten still 7 a.m. to 7:22. There's a minute and a half buffer there to overrun, and then there's literally 23 seconds for this, a minute 14 for this, 3 minutes for this. Then we're back on air. Every minute is accounted for, and so they're trying to find ways for us to get it out there more as well. And so hopefully with some work and obviously they're very cooperative, we can get some streaming stuff down the road, hopefully, and hopefully sooner than later.
yeah. And again, I appreciate everybody commenting. I do wanted to go with some of the questions. I only see one at least question, not statement. But Jeremy McCormick was asking if PK is going to be a regular spot in the future. That PK has shown out the last two times the Bassmaster, well, the only two times, like
Yeah,
the national championship
the two
and
biggest limits. Yeah.
yeah, the two biggest limits. It would be. I know there's a lot. We as Monday morning quarterbacks, armchair quarterbacks, whatever you want to call it. It seems like every decision is easy, but I know it's not, and there goes a lot into decisions. It would make sense to me, like, okay, Possum Kingdom should be, one of those that we need to have every year. Um, is that possible? Is there any, whether it's Possum Kingdom or any other lake, that you feel like, okay, we're gonna start looking into having this every year, or is that something that is not, for whatever reason, you can go into the reasons for that, that is not something you guys want to do, or whether it's Possum Kingdom or other like that you wanted to have every year?
Well, first I will say, well, here we had Starlink on Bussy Break, the house we stayed at, and it was nuts. It was so fast, so good. But yeah, Possum Kingdom, I literally spoke to them earlier this week. I want to go back, I really do. So we're working on a schedule. I've got the events in pencil with dates on it. AJ and Steve and I have all talked about it. So I feel like my main priority right now is the championship lake
Of
in
course, yeah.
the Oklahoma area. But hopefully, my goal, and obviously you can't hold me to it. I want to have a schedule in a month. I want to have it done in a month. That way we know. But yeah, PK obviously it's one of those lakes like Gunnersville, like we just saw the Hobie BOS on Cayuga, Caddo, Seminole. Those lakes you can fish every single year because, like with Caddo, you can fish it. I mean, PK, you live there. You can fish it in March, April, May. You can fish it in June. You could fish it right now if you didn't want to have a heat stroke.
Yeah.
There's 4 or 5, and it's the same way with Gunnersville. Gunnersville, we have I do the GSM, which used to be the rattle trap only tournament. Now it's rattle trap, Bill Lewis, Buckeye Lures, Yamamoto, and Steel Shad. I do that tournament every year for them, and we fish it in February. And
We
they
had
catch
it at
some good fish.
Texas today,
Yeah,
this
you
year.
sure did.
Yeah,
Yep,
Ray
we had. I
Roberts.
think. I think we had like 76. I think. Oh man, don't shoot me, but I think Dan won the thing, or at least was right there.
I think it was last
Um,
year. Didn't he like
Yeah. In February this year,
this year? I thought it was last year. Maybe it was this year.
the first year Sam Cox won it, and then here we go, February 5th, 2023. Let's see. Steve Staples. That's right. He had 101.5 inches. February 5th. I mean, we're sitting there shivering,
Yeah,
outside. And Daniel had 96 inches.
96 inches.
And probably would have, it's just a 1 day tournament now. But I'm pretty sure his kayak had a ton of water in it. So he had to get out and find something to bail water out of it. Randall Wallace was third with 93 3/4. We had the fourth place was 90 inches, fifth place was 89. So that's 5 90-inch bags at the beginning of February. And then, so that's at Gunnersville, one of those kinds of lakes, Seminole. Something I've found that I hear a lot: why the hell are we going back to Seminole? Or why are we going back to this or this? So I don't know. You answer that for me. I mean, how many years in a row is too many? Y'all answer it in the comments, because I do want to know. Because, like, for me, it would be hard. I honestly think in my mind we could build a schedule to where we could go to the same lakes except for change the months for 4 or 5 years in a row. Obviously you don't want to do that, because we, as a tournament series, you know, that's our job, is to service geographically. That's why
Yeah.
I'm going to work super hard to get us as spread out as I can to the regions that don't get much attention. And I hope that happens. If not this year, then, again, we've got 2025 to work and expand on. Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like 3 is pretty good. Seminole every month of the year. Yeah, Josh Counts. Who said that? Josh? Yep, it was Josh Counts. I knew it before I looked. I said it's got to be Josh Counts. But anyway, he's one of our dugout guys. He's a hammer down there. But yeah, I'm with you. I feel like 3 years. Stephen Bell 2 would be fine. I said 3, but after he said 2, I truly feel like back-to-back years is good, and then give it 1 year out of the loop and come back for a year or something. But then you got like all y'all's lakes down there, like Toledo Bend and
Yeah.
Rayburn and Fork and all that. Y'all's outdoor place does just such a good job, and Tennessee does a good job. But um, Georgia's got a good, wildlife program. Um, and that's something else I've tried to do too. I want to have
I
bodies of
agree.
water. Like we went to Hartwell. Hartwell's got a crazy population of spotted bass and largemouth. But there's days where you have to target a species. I learned that from Adam Reiser. You have to target a species to win a tournament. There's some months of the year you won't win on Lanier with or Hartwell with largemouth. You got to go after the spots, and that's what I wanted to kind of introduce into our sport at this level is cerebral challenges to some of the lakes. And that's hard to do. But thankfully, I am blessed, as I mentioned to you. I get to work with everybody and talk to all of y'all. So, the list of lakes again, and I say it all the time, and very few people actually do it. Go to my DMs and send me your top 5 lakes you would like to see next year. I want everybody to do that, because I copy and paste them onto an Excel sheet and then sort them. I want to see where everybody wants to fish, because, like Cody Milton said, we've been hitting some of these granddaddy lakes for so long, and they're not great anymore. Um, you're looking. I actually the Potomac and James River. That's something that's absolutely looked at. Again, and GL Scott, whoever that is, by the way, he's had like 3 or 4 comments on here, and they're all dead ringers. They're
Yeah.
right on the money. Um, but yeah, I mean, but when we look at places like the Potomac and them, the deciding factor is, can we get 150 people to fish it? At the end of the day, man, that's what I have to do is pick an area that's centrally located as best I can, with good fishing, a good time of year, where the weather's going to be good. I got to guarantee you good weather. You're not going to
Yeah.
come. And then, make sure that we can get people to make the drive if you have to, and hats off to the West Coast people showing up at PK. I mean, I forget the number, dude, but there was a lot,
Yeah, it
a
was.
lot of people made, and a lot of people made that trek. And And we had some good travel people. The Midwest people came. We had some Southerners come, and same way with Gunnersville and even Hartwell. Hartwell, I know we had it was either 12 or 21 people from west of Arkansas that made that drive to Hartwell, and that was pretty. That right there meant a lot because I will say this to you: Bass does pull the when I send them the Excel sheet from the Bass from the Tourney X standings. They pull and see where people are coming from, and they take note of that and they love it. When we double dip, I send them the numbers that I send them the link because I can't extract standings from somebody else's tournament. But I send them the link and they pull and see who double dipped and things like that, just because they're just curious about what we do.
Steve, I appreciate taking the time, and for those that commenting and watching, we do appreciate it. Everybody that's commenting, watching, leave us again your thoughts and your opinions. Um, and again, huge shout out to you. I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're a family
Oh
man.
man,
You're
I'm
super
good.
busy, and we talked for an hour and 6 minutes. But I did have a couple of things that I wanted to touch on you on, and now I lost my train of thought. But one of them, okay, like what grade would you give yourself as a tournament director? And this is your first full season as the Bassmaster characters. I know the season's not over yet, but so far, what would you grade yourself? A, B, C, D, or F? Yeah,
Probably a C because I feel
oh,
like
being humble there.
right out of the gate, oh, dude, I'm telling you, we cut up about it and everything, but if it worked for y'all, you wouldn't hear a compliment out of my mouth to myself a lot of days, but I know I do a good job and I work hard at it. But for me, sometimes the victories are short lived because I'm ready to move on. But I truly feel like because it bothered me just seeing that we missed on the communication so drastically. And you mentioned kind of what brought in and acted that change. GL and I actually were sitting around at Gunnersville the first tournament, and we just had a Hobie, and so people were, kind of like you said, like walking, on eggshells, and AJ and I discussed things, and so you know GL was like, man, I can't believe we missed this because he vets the rules too. He said, we kind of do, and he explained to me how they do talking, and he said, I feel like you all being, a solo artist, so to speak, not able to get yourself out of trouble as quickly as a boat can, this is a little too strict and everything. And so that's why, and the rules are written. So you mentioned kind of contradicting if you look at it on paper, correct. But, those just aren't changed due to legal. It takes so long to get that done. That's why, we preach to everyone. And this is something a lot of people don't understand is if there's a rule and then I say something on camera to you, you go by what I say to you verbally. That's what you stick with, um, because even if I was wrong in what I said it to you directly, matter of factly, so it will be on me if what you do is outside of that. So that's why, I misspoke on some few things, so I ding myself for that. But the communication thing, that's why I told to you it's important, the way I'm doing Bassmaster with having the recorded captain angler briefing. I still get up as you saw and do one for the pageantry and for social media and for the chamber to see what we do. But you all are sent the link to the 15-20 minutes. If a person can't spend 15 to 20 minutes listening to me to try to win 10 grand, then you don't literally don't need to be fishing. You just don't. Um, Take it serious. Don't get all wild and crazy. I got to retie. I got to rig. Sit down and listen. It's not that hard. Listen to those, and I'll explain to you. You can communicate about your day, upload your fish, talk about your stringer. The only thing is like Armando, you can't pedal up and say, "Hey, what are you catching them on?" But now, if you pedal up and Guillermo Gonzalez says, "Dude, I'm whacking them on a chatterbait. You need to pull out your chatterbait." He with gave his juice. That's allowed. You can give information of your own envelope, whatever you want to call it, on your own accord, but you can't solicit from another angler what you're wanting. If you want to come up to them and say, "Hey, I need, green pumpkin, purple flake Cincos. You got any?" You can do that, and we took all of that fun out for everybody,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, I was so like, look, man, you show up and catch your own fish, because we all know it has happened.
Yeah.
People ask, why do you do this? Well, just matter of factly, because folks won't do right. There's some folks that just won't do right. So sadly, good folks get punished for a little bit until we get it figured out on the initial drawback of it. But I feel like we got settled. We course corrected on all of that. So again, reach out, communicate. The pre-fishing, the communication, I think is settled. The wording will change next year. Um, I don't feel like there's anything else in them that really needs to be tinkered with at all, if any. And if there is, let me know. I think the water access is pretty clear and very lenient too. I mean, if you're paddling along and you bump over to, whoa, there's a log, then you're good. If you pull up and you get beached, well, then that's it. It's time to turn around. It's not that hard to do. I mean, Dylan Lowry took me through one of them log jams over the weekend, and I got zapped by some fire ants, dude. And those
Ooh.
things were like this deep, man. And so as I'm doing that, I'm sitting here. We're in South Georgia, and I'm thinking, dude, there's water moccasins everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here plowing ahead trying to get us in these octobos. But yeah, so that's why I kind of go with the sea route. I feel like as far as scheduling, we've hit the bodies of water pretty good.
Yeah. I have to give you
Um,
props for that one, for real.
and
Yeah.
dude, like AJ and I said, we
That's
had a long conversation today. That's hard to do. I mean,
and let me tell you something.
it's literally it's luck, isn't it?
And well, research and experience. Like I think the most underrated part of the what I call the Stevo effect, which we know the rules, we know some of the stuff um that has changed, but the I can't state I there's no way to overstate this. The lake selection this year compared to last year, and I'm not throwing shade at anybody, but
Shut up.
good lord, like that, as like I don't think people really appreciate, how what a huge improvement that has been. That's I mean, there was some head scratchers last year. Um,
Yeah.
Not just the lake selection, but the one tournament is going to be 1 day, the other tournament is going to be 2 days, but the angle of the year points was still going to be the same. Anyways, past this in the past. We move forward. We thank you. We do have a question from JT Hickman. I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse, but it has to do a little bit also with bass boaters. Our state having issues starting chapters, I'm assuming for the Bass Nation Kayak Series, due to having a deal with their border Bass Nations. Is there confliction between oh my God, Bass Boulder Nations and Bass Nation Kayak Series?
Yeah, Josh Evans has kind of asked the same thing, and I mean, yeah, to an extent.
Oh yeah, there is.
And it's not because they're jerks or anything like that, but and there's a simple way to put it that took me 2 years to figure out how to say it. Okay, and here in Tennessee we have an amazing governing body. Same in Georgia. I run Tennessee and Georgia Bass Nation with Sassy Dan, y'all know, and those guys are good. They've got it. They've got it. And what happened though early on was we showed them what we're currently doing in our grassroots, and they got it, and they saw we knew what we were doing, and so they understood they don't have time to run a kayak series. But us coming into, I'm just going to use a state, Josh in Maryland Bass Nation. That Maryland Bass Nation chapter has been established for a lot of years. So that's their chapter. Now it's ours too, because we pay Bass Nation dues, but we're brand new coming into it. So essentially, you have to look at it with the right kind of mindset. This ain't a gang. So we're not coming in asking to fly their colors or flag and run a kayak series that's going to make them look bad. But they also can't just hand the keys to a kayak tournament director and that dude be a fool. I mean, how do they know that this kayaker can actually run a good tournament? because when it comes down to it, when 100 people have sent in $30 to that kayak guy to pay the dues, and he hasn't turned it in, they're the chapter that gets hauled to
Yeah.
court for fraud. So, but there's ways around that. There really are. But what's happening, what I'm seeing is the biggest hangup is Maryland has a $30 Bass Nation dues and a $70 state dues. Well, that's $100 that they charge you. They pay the 30 to Bass Nation, and then that 70 they keep to operate within their state. So for years, they've had their $70 per angler, and they use it to buy a trailer, they use it to buy a scale, weigh bags, they use it for gas money for the TDs, they use it for entry fees if you make the regional. That's already been established. Well, if we come in and are expected to do that too, that's okay. We'll pay you your $100, but you take the 30 and send it to Bass Nation, Bassmaster. We get to keep that 70 and use it how we see fit. That's where the drawback is right now. And I think some of it comes because they think that they're going to have to run this series for us. So GL and I have had a long conversation since last, January, earlier this year. We would love to be able to figure out how to have our own governance, and I think we will get to that. I think it'll take a couple of years because, again, when we establish it, it's got to be done right. We can't do this one on the fly because that Bass Nation is that strong. Look at what that you're able to do on that boat side. You're able to make it to the Bassmaster Classic, and you're going to do the same on our side. I say 2 years. It shouldn't take that long, but I do need the help from everybody else because GL and I are kind of the ones that are going to have to figure this out, and I'm okay to do it. Um, but we got to figure out because the way it stands right now, and I know you Texas people will appreciate this. Each state is sovereign. You get your own setup. You do. You get your own
Yeah.
sovereignty. So however you see fit to run that state is how you do it. The only thing you have to do is have 100% membership because you get your insurance coverage through Bassmaster by having that, which is a big savings. And this ain't no run of the mill insurance, it's real stuff.
Yeah.
It covers the tournament director, the officers, the people on and off the water at the event. But it can be figured out. But the kayakers got to want to figure it out together too,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of backbiting and backstabbing, and it's human. It's human nature. But as far as the boaters, I feel like now with GL and Bose being more involved, you're going to hear yourself heard more when it comes to doing something. And it's already happened in a few states. They literally said, because they do have a little bit of control over a Bass Nation chapter, but again, it's designed so that they have sovereignty. So they kind of just have to do what the best they can and just hope for cooler heads to prevail. But again, always reach out to me. Nebraska, they just got established, a year or so ago. Just sent me their championship people who are 2 people. I know Josh Booth tried in Missouri, and that didn't happen and I don't feel like he did anything wrong whatsoever. I think everything was the way it needed to be, but there was that confusion of, well, we don't know what these guys can do, and Minnesota's trying to do something. Canada's looking to hopefully expand some. So yeah, it's going good. I mean, on as a whole. But there's still a lot of work to do, and like me and Josh Evans talked before, just get pissed off and decide that you're not going to let them run you off. Stay at it. And I'm here, and we'll communicate the whole way. Kicking and screaming until hopefully the door gets opened. So.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I've had you for an hour and 20 minutes. Let me make sure you have no other questions in the comments before I let you go. But yeah, I really do appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, a family, and all that. So, I mean, shout out to you, to what you've done, Dwayne Wall. If you're still watching, shout out to Dwayne. I got to get Dwayne on the podcast soon to talk, Tourney X and how it really has helped out immensely the growth of this sport, but that technology. So, Steve, again, thank you. If you mentioned if people want to get in touch with you, so we always want, before we all, and I've been guilty of this, before we become these keyboard warriors, Monday morning quarterbacks, where we're going to post and criticize Steve or AJ. Um, where can people, if they have a legitimate questions, where can people send you a request? Or how can people reach you? What's the best way for people to reach you?
Um, Honestly, I say my email, but and that was something I wanted to really stay engaged with. But if you're on here watching this, shoot me a Facebook Messenger, and what I typically do is text you my phone number, and then we'll go on text so that I can save your contact because it won't disappear from my text. And if it's something really, really engaging, then I'll have it. You send me everything we talked about in an email, but the best way is to send me a message on here. My information, my phone number, and everything is all over the Tourney X stuff. It's on Facebook here. So yeah, shoot me a message. We'll exchange phone numbers and we'll talk.
Awesome. And I think Jeremy McCormick speaks for most of us, saying, I believe you're the best thing that Bass could have ever done for the kayak series. I think most of us agree with that. So big shout out to you, Steve. Thank you so much. And, you're always welcome to come back on the podcast and talk about, the Bassmaster kayak series or just whatever you want to talk about, life in general. It's always a pleasure having you on the show.
Wow. Okay, I'm sorry. I just got a message that's kind of blown my skirt up here. All right, man. Hey, I do appreciate you. And
Can you
again,
share the message or not?
no,
Okay.
hell to the no. But no, like seriously, I appreciate everything all you all say to us. AJ and I had that conversation today. You all telling us at events, good job, good this, good that. I mean, it means just as much as the constructive criticism. And sometimes we get busy and we're not blowing you off, but it gets heard, and y'all do such a good job thanking me and being appreciative of everything I've done. And if you want to call it a sacrifice, I won't, but it's great. It's the best job in the world right now. But so I do appreciate all of y'all, and I know that the support's there. And like we mentioned earlier with Dan, I mean, we're not always going to agree, but at the end of the day, you're on the side of the road. We're going to help each other change flat tires. So, you know, it's all fishing, and it's just like baseball, and football and sports. You're going to argue for your team for and against, and we're both going to be wrong, but then we're still going to be friends. So I appreciate all of that. And like you said, Facebook Messenger, I'll give you my phone number and we'll talk about whatever we need to talk about.
Awesome. And to kind of like piggyback on that sentiment, it's always great to give constructive criticism. It's good to use social media. What I would suggest to everyone, if you have a complaint, if you have something, if you want to, it's your free will. If you want to post it, whether it's KBN group page, whatever, KBF group page, whatever group page you want to post it on, but just make sure you do it respectful. There's no reason to attack people's character just because we agree or disagree on a decision. And I think that has more effect when people just do a respectful comment on like, hey, I would like this or I don't like this. And I think this is, and also try to offer what is it that you would like, because it's so easy to say, well, I don't like this. Okay, well, what is your alternative to that? And I think that goes a long way. A lot of times when people start attacking other people personally, even though they've never met them or talked to them in person, I think that's where your criticism is now lost. You may have a point, but because you attacked this other person, now the point is kind of lost and it's kind of overshadowed by the lack of respect. So that I think that's what we try to do here in our podcast. Both Dan and I know we didn't see eye to eye, but I understand that Dan wants the best for everyone in the Bassmaster kayak series and in kayak fishing in general. So he respectfully made his point of view, and that's what we want. So
Oh,
again,
absolutely. Yeah.
like JT mentioned, right? Final comment: rising tides rises all ships. So that is completely accurate. So again, Steve, thank you so much. I'll let you go. But for those out there listening and watching, thank you again. If you're listening on an MP3 format on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, leave us your review. If you can leave your 5-star review, it does help out the growth of the podcast. In Spotify, we do have questions about the show that you can reply on it, and whether I like your reply or not, as long as it's respectful, I would post your reply on the Spotify social media app. So I want to hear your comments, good or bad. because we want to do the same as Steve is doing, improve our podcast, just like Steve is improving the Bassmaster Kayak series. If you're going to be on the water, please wear your PFDs. If you're going to have a couple of beers while you're at it, just again, we can't emphasize this enough. Drink responsibly, stay hydrated this summer, people, and make sure you make it back home to your loved ones. Have a good day, everyone. Peace out.